Welcome in, everyone. Trucker Talk Radio presents a new show, Trucking Conversations with Justin Holden. I want to welcome everybody and appreciate everybody coming in for my first episode. We're going to do a new show here when it's just me by myself. Still the kind of same concept. We're going to talk to leaders and different people in the industry and just have a straight good old conversation. After spending the past several years interviewing transportation leaders through Trucker Talk Radio, I wanted to create this new series that allows us to take an even deeper dive into people, ideals, and businesses and innovation shaping our industry. This show will just be about trucking. It's about leadership, innovation, public policy, entrepreneurship, and technology. And the most important, the people who dedicate their selves to this career and moving the industry forward. Whether my guest is leading a carrier, building new technology, advocating for an industry, or helping shape transportation policies, my goal is simple: to have a meaning conversation that educates, inspires, and provides real value to everyone that works in transportation. Before we begin today's episode, I'd like to tell you a little bit about what we're building over at ReadyApp, my main sponsor. At ReadyApp, we're working to create a more connected transportation industry. Through Driver Verify and the ReadyApp Passport, our growing platform, we are helping drivers maintain verified professional identities while giving carriers better tools for recruiting, onboarding, communication, and workforce management. Go check them out. It's ready-app.com. It takes about 5 or 10 minutes if you're a driver to create a driver passport. It's all your digital information in one place that you, the driver, own and can share with anyone at any time. And drivers, there's a ton of benefits on there for you to take advantage of. So go check them out, ready-app.com. My guest today is someone whose career has touched nearly every corner of the trucking industry. Jim Mullen currently serves as president of Truckload Carriers Association, representing the interest of truckload carriers across North America. The association focuses exclusively on truckload segment and representing carriers operating more than 220,000 trucks with over $40 billion in annual revenue. Before joining TCA, Jim built an extraordinary career spanning private industry, government, and transportation law. He served as acting administrator of the FMCSA, where he helped oversee the nation's commercial motor vehicle safety program. Prior to that, he served as chief counsel for the FMCSA. Earlier in his career, Jim spent more than a decade with Werner Enterprise, where he oversaw legal affairs, safety, claims, human resources, and government relations. He has also worked extensively in transportation consulting, autonomous trucking, legal strategy, and national transportation policy. There are very few people who have experienced trucking from so many perspectives. Today, we're going to discuss leadership, regulation, highway safety, autonomous trucking, tech, and where Jim sees the industry moving over the next decade. Jim, welcome to Trucking Conversation.
Justin, thank you.
Yes,
That was a
sir.
long bio. Sounds like I
Yeah.
can't keep a job. I've been doing
Yeah.
this, doing that.
Well, I'm surprised you still hadn't drove yourself out of it with that much and dealing with the different perspectives. I mean, it's a stressful industry, but
Yeah.
you're in all the stressful parts. So we appreciate your dedication to the industry, and
Yes, sir.
would love to start at the beginning of your story. With all that you've done, what really got you involved in transportation?
Yeah. Well, first, Justin, thanks for having me on, and I'm honored to be your maiden voyage on your first solo venture here.
Thank you,
So,
sir. I appreciate
yeah,
that.
yeah. So I got out of law school, 1993. Went to University of Nebraska. I was practicing law in Omaha, Nebraska, and I've been doing that for several years. And then I became acquainted with a guy by the name of Clarence Werner, C.L. Werner, who was the founder of Werner Enterprises. And at the time, he was the chairman, the CEO, and I knew him on a social level. And I had been, believe it or not, Justin, I was practicing as a plaintiff's lawyer at the time. I started off as a defense lawyer, but then I went to the dark side for a short bit and I was doing plaintiff's work for a while. So when I would see CL, he would say, "Hey, you're like the fox in the hen house. Why don't you come out and take a look at our programs on litigation and risk and safety and those types of things?" And so I did, and that was 2005. I started out as a consultant for them, and then within
Mm-hmm.
a few months, CL asked if I'd become a full-time employee, so I became the general counsel. So that's how I got into the trucking. but I've loved it ever since. I remember the first major accident losses, we were in a room, in a conference room, and talking about the loss, and the director of safety kept talking about a glad hand. The glad hand failed. The glad hand failed. Finally, I just said, "We're going outside. You're going to go show me what the hell a glad hand is on a truck." So,
Right.
it's a gradual learning process in the
Oh
industry.
yeah.
Um, but I love the industry. You talked about the different areas. I really am fortunate to have seen a lot of different angles of the industry. And so I'm very lucky to have seen that. I wouldn't trade what I'm doing now, wouldn't trade the industry I'm working in for any other industry. It's our drivers, are the trucking fleets certainly are the backbone of not only our economy, but really the
Absolutely.
entire nation. And just to be able to be involved in it and the capacity that I have over the years, it's truly an honor.
Hey drivers, our partners over at Zero Breeze have designed a no idle air conditioner for sleeper cabs and fleets that can pay for itself in just one summer. If you're spending up to $40 a night in fuel, it's time to stop idling and start saving. For $50 off, email sales@zerobreeze.com or text them at 945-247-1298. And don't forget to ask them about their extended warranty option. Check them out today at zerobreeze.com. Yeah, I wished more than just regular Americans understood how important the trucking industry, the truck driver, is to their daily life. I think now, especially with Amazon basically bringing a package to your door every day, they forget, okay, how did it get to Amazon? Before it comes on a little van, and how important it is for groceries to get to the store, clothes to get. I mean, because we do so much online now, but I mean, if you didn't have that, I mean, the economy would crash probably overnight.
In our society today, we have such short-term memories, right?
Yes,
And so I was at
absolutely.
FMCSA as the acting administrator when COVID hit. I had the pleasure of writing, segments of speeches for the president when he was on the White House lawn, thanking God for truck drivers. And he wasn't just the president. Everybody knew to thank God for truck drivers, right?
Right. Yep.
But then we get back to our normal lives and people start to forget how truck drivers are to our entire everything we do, right? So people
Absolutely.
seem to think it just drops from the sky to an Amazon truck to their door, and that's just not the way that works.
Yeah, and I was in the same thinking. I was hoping, after COVID, things would start, going more, because and I drove to Nashville. I live about 2.5 hours from Nashville, and I drove to Nashville this weekend, and I seen 4 or 5 trucks getting cut off, home, and I'm like, they're working, y'all. I mean, yeah, I get aggravated if two of them are beside each other on Interstate 40, but he's going faster. They're governed, so they're not going much faster than. I mean, you just got to, but they forget that real quick. And it's just like, man, cut them a break. They really don't make as much money as you think they do. And they're not, they're away from home. So, cut them a break. So you're exactly right.
Right.
We definitely have a very short attention span as a society.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, with everything you've done with government and, and then the, the leadership and the, what has really helped your experience, or what maybe changed your mind a little bit about transportation once you got in it?
Well, the people, I think, first and foremost, I mean, we've talked about it a little bit already, but the people are just rock solid people by and large, right? Whether it's the drivers, whether it's the fleet managers, whether it's, I'm around a lot of executives in the trucking industry. And most of the time, if you didn't know they were a trucking executive because you know who they are, you wouldn't know it. I mean,
Right.
they're normal Joes, generally speaking. So the people is what has amazed me the most. I've been fortunate, right? I mean, so whenever I was around CL, I'd ask a lot of questions, right? And he was very patient and provided me a lot of education on trucking. He should tell me he'd backed more miles in a truck than I'd driven more miles in my car on a forward basis. He was probably right. And then his sons were they started in the industry when they were literally kids, washing trucks, washing trailers. And I got to work alongside Werner's current chairman and CEO, a guy named Derek Leathers, and I'd say Derek is kind of one of the top leaders in the industry these days. So I've been real fortunate to be around the people I have on the private side,
Right.
the fleet side, and then the 2 years that I spent at FMCSA. Honestly, I kind of took that appointment. So it's for those folks who don't know, those positions are appointed by the president that I had.
Mhm.
And I wasn't going to take it just by coincidence. I happened to be talking to somebody who he was a little older guy, and he told me whenever you get offered the opportunity to serve in that capacity, at the time it was Chief Counsel at FMCSA, he said the answer is yes. The answer is yes. You serve, you do your best, and not only is it kind of your duty, but you'll get more out of it than you'll give to the agency. And he was right, right? I mean, it was very educational. In the time when I was there, when COVID hit, boy, Justin, I got to tell you, if if you thought you knew a lot about the supply chain before COVID hit, you were wrong. And boy, I mean,
Right.
everything that happened had consequences upstream, downstream, in some other way. So I was on the phone nonstop for 6 months, talking to different components of the supply chain and stakeholders, and learning as I went along. That was a time that I'm very proud of, not just my contribution, but just the way that the industry, and to your point earlier, I mean that this people rallied around what folks in our
Mhm.
industry do, and it took, unfortunately, a national pandemic, a worldwide pandemic, for folks to realize it.
Yeah.
But I think you know how it goes. Dog bites man, that's not news. Man bites dog, that's news. And the black marks on our industry sometimes get more attention than they should, and that kind of, and we just need to do a better job of letting folks know how important our drivers are, and
Yeah.
how the vast majority of them are doing it right. That
Mhm.
event last
Yeah.
week at the White House with the veterans. I don't know if you
Mhm.
saw some of that. I mean,
Yeah.
what a tremendous, not only a ceremony, but just the gathering of the leaders of the industry and the President of the United States standing beside, and the
Mhm.
commitment to hire veterans. I mean, that that's kind of like the epitome of our industry, right?
Yeah.
That type of thing. And I remember drivers that I would talk to during COVID. They're literally like, we feel almost like a fourth branch of the government. I mean, because
Mm.
but for us, nobody's getting their stuff. You had some cities, some towns saying we
Yeah.
don't want truck drivers come in because they're going to bring the bug, and then some saying you can't leave when you come in because you're going to take the bug. It was just craziness. And
It
uh,
was.
a little normalcy is good. We're back to some normalcy.
Yeah, most definitely. And I love what the president's doing with that. I've always wondered, and I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and hiring a veteran has been so hard. Every owner operator company I've ever worked at, the insurance doesn't accept anything they did. So I'm glad to see that. I'm not military, but both my grandfathers were Navy retired military. And they were fortunate they were in the 60s and 70s, so their retirement benefits were very good. Now, all our soldiers go over, they come back, a lot of them have a limb missing or whatever, and then they can't get back into the flow of American life. So for them to have an opportunity to come back and do what they were doing for the government, I don't know why you can't drive a truck in the United States if you're in Germany driving a semi, sort of a semi truck or a flatbed or whatever it might be with a camper top on it. But to offer that to them, and because they deserve more than what they get in when they get home. So I appreciate that. I'm hoping that takes off, and the insurance companies will work with the president. I know the carriers will. The carriers will be more than fine. I think a lot of it's got to do with the insurance, just getting that worked out. But I believe Trump can negotiate anything, so I'm not too worried about that part of it. But
Yeah.
what you were talking about a minute ago led me to what my next segment was going to be, was about your leadership at FMCSA, and of course you being there during COVID is a huge deal overall. But what I'd like for you to tell the listeners, my listeners come from people that's not even in trucking, to drivers, to executives, and different things. But for the most part, I don't think most people understand really what the FMCSA really does.
Right.
It's just like what you just said. When it comes to trucking, we never hear good news. It's always bad news. I do think probably, and you might agree, they're understaffed for the amount of drivers and carriers and brokers that we have in a country. There's never going to be enough employees that we can have to do it. But you work understaffed. But just kind of talk about what they handle, what they do, and then your role into that a little bit more, and maybe your biggest struggle that you had to deal with during COVID, or even if it's just for the whole group. I hope it's a time we never have again. To be honest, I don't know if we would, because I think we would handle it different, because it was a pandemic, but I think we all as a world made it worse than probably what it really was, and the hysteria and all that. But just kind of go into that a little bit and explain that to my listener.
For sure. Yeah, yeah. So I think I'll start with the lack of resources, because that's really something that the TCA, Truckload Carriers Association, and I are focusing on right now. In fact, we've authored about a 20-page opinion paper on how Congress needs to modernize the FMCSA. So a little bit of a comparison. If you look at FMCSA versus say FAA, Federal Aviation Administration,
Yep.
FAA has about 46,000 employees, 46,000. FMCSA has about 1,120, right? And so if you look at it from the regulated population, for every FAA employee, there's only 37, 38 regulated entities that they oversee. One employee for every 7,150 FMCSA regulated entities. So I mean, their budget's 27 billion. FMCSA is just shy of 1 billion. So I know it's not apples to apples, different industries, but I think it does shed a light on the fact that FMCSA is not properly staffed. And by the way, of the $1 billion they get, about 600 million goes right back out to the states and to grant recipients. So their budget truly to operate is around 400 million, and there's some other things that are just mandatory. So they're understaffed, and the TCA is leading the charge to get Congress to right size that and to modernize FMCSA.
They should.
American Trucking Association, they're on board with it. Tank truck carriers are on board with it. National Motor Freight Traffic Association, they're on board. State associations are on board. TIA is on board.
Awesome.
So it's a collaborative effort, but we got the ball rolling, and it's going to take all of us. And there's some safety groups, in fact, that have joined our effort. So it's kind of across the board. So I echo what you said about being understaffed. So, but what do? They regulate, obviously, all commercial motor vehicles, trucks, buses, motor coaches, what have you. Not school buses, but motor coaches. Of that 1,120 employees, they have about 500 that are actual investigators that are responsible for doing on-site investigations, enforcement actions, and those types of things. And that's where they really need to beef up their staff. It should be double that. It really should be double that. But they regulate in a lot of different ways. But one of the ways that they don't, right, is as we've seen with the issuance of non-domiciled CDLs, is that they don't issue the CDL. I think a lot of non-trucking folks don't understand that the federal government does not issue CDLs. That's the states that do that. And the feds give funding through grants to the states to do it properly. Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't. And that's the other part about this modernization, is there needs to be greater auditing and oversight of what the states do with that $600 million that the feds give them. They have a very big task. And as you know, over the last, almost close to 2 decades, the number of fatalities involving large trucks and buses have been anywhere from about 5,000 to 5,900. And that's a big number. Not all of those obviously are caused by the negligence or the fault of the truck driver. In fact, the minority are caused by the truck driver. But the FMCSA's main task, Justin, is to just drive that number down. And obviously everybody wants to get to zero. And they do that through regulations. They do that through enforcement of their regulations. One of the things that I'd like to see them laser focus on is just the safety mission. Sometimes they get involved in some things that do not involve safety. My personal opinion, I'm not sure if you're following this, but the efforts on the brokerage side for the broker to have to give the trucker, the motor carrier, the rate that they were paid by the shipper. Yeah. That's just not safety related. That's not the core mission of FMCSA. And when you start devoting other resources to those non-safety essential missions, you're watering down effectiveness.
Especially when you're that small of a group, that makes total sense.
It does. I'm not saying this, I'm not taking a side on whether you should or shouldn't have to do it. I'm just saying you're taking valuable resources from the agency. So that's what they do. They have offices in every state. Obviously, they have a state administrator in every state when they're fully staffed, by the way, but they're not right now. But And those are the folks that are out there in the states that are really doing the frontline work on enforcing of those regulations. And the folks in DC, those are the folks that are, quote, making the regulations. And one last point, of that 1,120 employees, only 5 of whom are what's called political appointees, where the president or the secretary of the DOT appoints them. So as the political, changes, the White House changes, those folks change. And
Right.
so it's the 1,115 employees that are, quote, career employees. They're the ones that are there after the politicals come and go. And so what they do is extremely important to make sure there's continuity within the agency.
In your time there during the COVID, that had to be so extreme because you are understaffed and you're dealing with stuff that you never planned on. It wasn't like it was in a brief report, for years to look back at history and go,
Yeah.
this is what you do when this happens. So what was the most important things that you had to handle and try to, or the organization try to handle during that time that maybe just a normal person wouldn't understand? Because, we only seen what was on, I seen more because I was deep in the industry at that point. But, for everybody just watching Fox, CNN, yeah, they just seen, okay, truck drivers can drive more a day, no big deal. But it was a whole lot more to it than that.
A whole lot more to it. So I was going to get to your question earlier. So what were some of the biggest challenges?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer to one of the biggest challenges, this is pre-COVID, was the pace at which the government works. It's like there's no urgency. It's snail's pace. Now it's very deliberate, and so right. I mean, it's different than private enterprise. So I get that, and I took me a while to fully appreciate that. That's not to say I still wasn't frustrated as heck about the slow pace, but the slow and deliberate pace is something that was challenging for me coming from the private sector. I didn't get in there until 2018, so the first Trump administration was already 2 years into it before I went in, and had started the hours of service rulemaking, and the careers said the career employees, you'll never get this done in the next 2 years. It takes 4 years to get this stuff done. And it's like, nope, not acceptable, not acceptable. And we got it done, and proud of that. But the flip side of that was when COVID hit, to your point, some people said, oh, yeah, they can just drive more hours. Well, there were so many things we had to do, right? Because now you have folks that are entering the industry, they can't even get trained because of the distancing. I mean, all those places are shut down. The states aren't open, so that you can't issue new CDLs. You can't renew your CDL. So we did a lot of tweaking or exemptions to rules that nobody had ever contemplated before, because you never had a situation where the DMVs closed for 6 months or the truck driving schools are closed for 6 months. Heck, when early on, I don't know if you remember, but there were certain cities, towns, whatever, that they wouldn't let more than 6 people in a business at one time. Well, how many employees do you think Pilot Flying J has on premises at any given time, right? And so
Exactly. Yep.
so we worked very closely with cities and local law enforcement on kind of coming up with solutions to that sort of thing. So my point of that is, I tell you that one of the biggest challenges was the pace. However, during COVID, because we were able to suspend some of those types of processes because of the urgency of the situation, some of those same careers that said you'll never get a rule done in 4 years, they were working 14, 15 hours a day to make sure that we were pushing out what needed to be pushed out so that the supply chain could keep open. And that was kind of the thing that I'm like, well, see how much we can get done if we just get after it. And we all would laugh about it, but then say, but Mullen, there's a reason why we go slow and steady. I'm like, I know, but I prefer the fast and furious. The folks who would frustrate me early on about the pace were the ones that really stepped up to the plate and got things done when there was a major sense of urgency. And kudos to them for doing that. That was a big deal.
Awesome. Yeah, that was just a crazy time that, I don't think that, like I said, the regular American had no clue the behind the scenes and what everybody had to go through. And I mean, I remember even traveling. The only places I ever stopped, I have a daughter. I think she was like 8 or 9. Well, I'll see, she would have been like 12. I only stopped at truck stops. It was the only place that was open that had a bathroom,
That's right.
So
Mhm.
there was a lot of things like that. Well, let's get into what you're doing now at the Truckload Carriers Association.
Yeah.
You'd said a minute ago that y'all wrote up a bill to try to get passed. So kind of tell everybody that's unfamiliar with what do y'all do? What's your mission and things like that?
That's right. That's right. So we're the only trucking trade association that's dedicated solely to truckload carriers. And now we get along with everybody. We get along with the ATA, we get along with the WIDA, we get along with tank truck folks,
Hmm.
and work together, 90% of the time. But we're focused solely on truckload. And so we only work on issues that are truckload related. Just kind of our core values and our core mission is, safety and education of safety programs. That's, one of our major pillars. Advocacy, predominantly on the federal level, whether it's the Capitol Hill members of Congress, whether it's the administration and the agencies, advocating for things that are good for truckload carriers and trying to stop things that are not good for truckload carriers. So there's safety education, there's advocacy. Another value that most of our members list on their top three is just a networking to be around other
Yep.
truckload operators. We have our big national convention in the spring, which has 1,200 to 1,400 attendees, 3 days, policy meetings and networking. And then we have a safety and security meeting in the summer. And then we just finished our refrigerated, where I think we're the only trade association that has a refrigerated only conference, which was very well attended as well. So those are our three main conferences, although we do a lot of educational material, online education. And
Hmm.
then we have a relationship with the University of Denver, what's it's called NATME, um, where we offer certification in safety and fleet manager and shop work for managers and those types of things. So I don't know the exact number, Justin, but I think we push out a little over 100, 150 certifications in those areas every year and
No.
help train. What is kind of funny, one of the folks that sends probably the most people to the NATME training is Walmart, right? And
Right.
they're not even a member, but they see the value in what we do. So we're proud of NATME. So that's kind of a big picture of what our organization does.
Okay. And it sounds like y'all are very focused on safety.
Yep.
One of the things that a lot of our guests on here talk about, and it's not per safety, but it is part of safety, is truck parking.
Yep.
You just sat there and made a point that a lot of that money goes to the states. I think every rest area should be done away with on the pedestrian side. It should be for trucks only. I wish the government would, and I don't know who needs to be a part of it. I was thinking about this other day driving on Interstate 40. I wish they would do some kind of domain and take interstate land. Parking lot's not going to cost a lot to build per se.
Yep.
And you put a restaurant in the middle of it. That's what old truck stops used to be, right? You had a good old diner, you had a bunch of truck stops. That way you got people there 24/7 monitoring the place and give driver and charge the drivers. I think we're at a point now that carriers need to figure out that we have to bump the pay $20 a night because now we can save that driver time on his clock. He's in a safe location. The freight's in a secure, safe location versus I think I seen over 100 trucks in like a 5 mile radius parked on the ramps and the side interstate. I mean, that's so dangerous, not only for them, but for the passenger cars. Is
Yep.
that something that y'all, because that seems like I said to be more and more talked about on the safety side. And it's one of the more, I guess, refreshing safety things that we talk about because you can only talk so much about non-domicile CDLs till you talk it blue in the face and different things. But is that something that y'all try to help facilitate in a way?
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. So TCA has been extremely involved in, efforts with Congress to get additional funding for truck parking. And we worked again, hand in hand with the other associations, ATA, OIDA, those. But yeah, there's been the last couple of years additional money set aside for truck parking. One of the things that you see, whether it's truck parking or whether it's a terminal for a trucking company, it's the not in my backyard mentality where locals, they're resisting any and all rezoning for that type of thing. They want the goods that come on the truck, but they don't want the trucks, right? Right.
Right, exactly. Yep.
So I know that there's a lot of that, and then you touched on, those folks that are offering parking for a fee. I know that's not a real popular option or topic for some folks, but the more fleets that I talk to, they see it, to your point, if they offer to pay for it directly, and there's some these providers that you can do that, but
Mhm.
they see it as a recruitment and retention tool, right? So if they're
Yep.
willing to pay whatever that price is for their truck driver to not have to look for 45 minutes for a place to park, not knowing where they're going to park, not knowing where it's secure, that is a recruiting and retention tool. Not to mention it's the right thing to do, right? So there's that.
Right. Yeah.
And so I think you're seeing as the problem becomes more pronounced, even though the government's trying, kind of get back to our earlier discussion. If we're going to rely on the government to fix all our problems, we're going to be waiting a long, long
A
time
long time. Yeah.
versus the private enterprise. So, we have members, in fact, that are associate members that provide those for hire, for pay
Mhm.
parking services. And I do think that you're going to start to see some adoption. I will give one last kind of sort of plug. I know that the Department of Transportation has an advisory committee that's looking into public-private relationships on secured parking. And I mean, they have the pro forma. I mean, they're not just getting started. They're pretty far along.
Oh, good.
And to your point, some of those locations where you already have infrastructure built out, do something public-private on the adjoining, land, and whether it's a long-term lease from the government, whatever it is, find a way to fund it, find a way to get the infrastructure up sooner rather than later, and make sure that the men and women that are delivering 73% of our freight have a place to park. Back in my days when I was running the safety department at Werner, I mean, we would have a handful of those accidents every year, more than a handful, where
Mhm.
someone's parked on the shoulder. I mean, maybe not even parked, maybe just broken down. And
Right.
and at night, motorists aren't paying much attention. They kind of just gravitate to what they see and
Right.
pow right in the rear end of a tractor trailer. So parking on the shoulder, I get why folks do it, and they think they're shutting down for rest, and I get that, but it ain't safe. It's not
No.
safe.
It's not, and the biggest problem that I've seen with truck parking, and there's several organizations I've had them on the podcast and promoting them, but none of them are per se close to the interstate. They're and that's where all the I mean, there's a lot of trucks off interstate, but you drive I-40, I-65, I-10, those three alone where I live it's ridiculous the amount of trucks that are on the road at any time, and they need to have it there more. So I'm glad that you know that they're trying to come up with things, because I think that's one of the bigger issues outside of fraud that
Yeah.
I think that we're dealing with. But let's go ahead and bring the ugly thing out is about the fraud, and then two, the Supreme Court ruling. That's of course a big topic. But first, the fraud. I know that's something y'all probably have a conversation about, daily, but explain to the listeners how bad it is. I mean, because it's not, I mean, it's just, and the thing that I don't think people understand either is me and you can come up with a solution today. They'll have something else next week that
Well,
they can, go after. So, what do
yeah.
y'all do to try to help the truckload side with that?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head. If you remember, was it Johnny Carson? How hot? So hot. How hot is it? How bad?
Mhm.
How bad is it? Man, we don't. Nobody really knows how bad it is, right? That's because
Right.
it's so bad, and a lot of folks don't care to report it because they think it's a black eye on their record, so to speak. So,
Yep.
but it's calculated in the billions of dollars, and it's terrible. And secondly, this isn't, although this still does happen, obviously, like the organized crime smash and grab, there's still that
Mhm.
going on. But the sophistication of the bad actors that are committing fraud in our industry is
Yes.
insanely sophisticated. And they'll come up with all types of ways. They'll start the legitimate, or they'll buy a legitimate DOT number, whatever it is, and they will deliver enough loads to garner the shipper's confidence. They'll find out the tendencies, the lanes, the times, the security mechanisms. Then they'll wait for that high value load. Bam! Before you know it, they're gone with a $700,000 load, and you'll never hear from them again. And those go rinse and repeat with other different motor carrier or DOT number. So they're extremely sophisticated. They'll hack your systems. They'll get your bill of lading. They'll get your proof of delivery. They'll get all that stuff, and they'll represent themselves out as Mullen Trucking, a reputable trucking company, and it's some fraudster that's stolen Mullen Trucking's identity, so to speak. So they're very sophisticated. And one of the things that we need to do, that FMCSA needs to do, and that kind of goes back to this modernization effort that we're on, is they need to have better vetting processes so that they can track who these chameleon carriers are, who these carriers are that are, running 20 different, 30 different, 100 different DOT numbers and just fraud after fraud, and then move on to the next DOT number. And so there are tools there today that the private sector has developed that it's not foolproof, but it's a heck of a lot better than what the agency has at its disposal. To track those fraudsters and prevent those fraudsters from A, entering the industry, or B, remaining in the industry. So it's a huge problem. And by the way, to your listeners that don't understand the severity of the problem, here's what they do understand. It costs them more for their goods they buy at the grocery store. It's just a fact of life.
Absolutely.
Somebody's going to pay for that. And it's us. It's us. So the government's working on it. Private sector's working on it. I do think what Administrator Barton at FMCSA is doing, and I do know they are using some of these private enterprises on a contract basis to track some of these bad actors. And so they're getting more, we, the people trying to prevent the bad acting, we're becoming more sophisticated too. But to your point, it'd be something if they just spent all this time and energy on a legitimate business. I mean, because again, they're sophisticated folks. These aren't just your run of the mill back alley thugs. These folks know what they're doing, and like anything else, it's an ROI for them, and they're causing a lot of havoc. But I'm glad to see that kind of that attitude I talked about earlier, where people didn't want to talk about it. They'd rather just sweep it on the rug. Nothing to see here. We didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
Now I think it's become so pronounced and so prevalent that everybody's like, hey, we got to do something about this.
Stick together. Yeah. I do think it's one thing that, the industry's always been fragmented and nobody ever wants to share what they're doing because they're afraid somebody, but I think the fraud's gotten so bad that, the carriers, the broker, everybody's trying to work together. And that's one thing that my main sponsor, ReadyApp's doing is with this driver verify and digital passport. The passport, it's basically all the information a driver has is CDL, medical card, picture of a truck, insurance, and it's there for him to share with anybody at any moment to prove who he or she is, because the brokers have got to do something now a little bit more, and that gives that, and they can share, decide, each side can decide. But the one thing that I'm proud of too is the driver verify part, and it basically, the carrier has to verify the driver and carrier. Well, you just brought it up, and I think it's a big point. What we do is we have rosters of all carriers on ReadyApp. So if a lot of times what happens with truckloads, the drivers know, especially the owner operators, they know they're never getting their, or they think they know that they're never getting their escrow back. And that's a big issue. So they don't even try to get it back. They just say, well, I'm not giving you back your ELD and your stickers. I'm just going to keep it because you're keeping $2,000. Well, what happens is those, not all of them, but there's some that will continue to run under that carrier, and there's no way to figure that out. Well, we've got a way in there that the carrier cuts that driver off. So if a broker can automatically look within 2 seconds to see if John Smith is still at ABC Trucking, and if he's not, then everybody knows, hey, you can't work with that driver. That MC number don't work, because those little things add up over time.
For sure.
Do you see with where we're at how driver identity and things like that are going to become more and more important to try to help what the brokers are having to deal with the Supreme Court ruling? Because even the Supreme Court ruling, it's a lot of gray area. There's nearly no way to really know what you need to do yet, because it's all new to everybody.
Yeah. I do think that what ReadyApp is doing and others in that space, that's absolutely going to become extremely important. And at some point in time, I think it's going to be the norm that if you don't use those types of service, then you're
hiding something.
That's right. And so I do think that's a great tool to help prevent some of that fraud. I think digitizing the bill of lading entirely would help that process as well. And I know there are some folks in the industry that are working on that. We mentioned the industry, but here's here's what the government can do and should be doing, and there's legislation pending. There's a bill pending, has not yet passed Congress, that the CORCA bill, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act. And what that does is it sets up a standard unit, if you will, within the government that works across DOT, Homeland Security, CBP, FBI. And because now what happens, and I'm sure some of your carriers and drivers that are listeners, now they call local authorities, local cops. They're working on rapes and murders, and they got other things to work out. Like, wait a minute, you got $100,000 load stolen, and the guy's in New York, and I'm in Texas. I don't know. I can't help. But the feds are kind of the same. They're working on whatever, perhaps. But what this legislation would do was it would set up a clearinghouse, for lack of a better term, where all these different agencies and state and local could collaborate, and it funds it. And so that would be, because you asked one thing, what can an association like TCA do? Well, we can advocate for that type of assistance. Is it the silver bullet? Is it going to stop it? No. But I go back to when our current administrator Bars, before you can become administrator, you have to be confirmed by the Senate. And I was at his hearing, and they were talking about this. Senator Cruz from Texas was peppering him about fraud. And of course, Administrator Bars, he came from law enforcement, and he said, well, until people start going to jail, you're just going to see it continue to grow. And so to that point of that legislation, it makes it a federal crime, sending people to jail. Fraudsters don't like going to jail. They might look at some other business to try to defraud rather than trucking if they're ending up in jail. So that legislation and enforcing those rules and laws would be very, very helpful. And it's never going to go away, but again, jail time.
You got to have some punishment in there at some point. I mean, there's, it's free reign otherwise. So no, I
That's
like
right.
that. I think that needs to be more. I mean, I get it. Our jails are full already, but there's a lot of stuff that would work with that make the crime, make the pay, the reaction to what you do. I spent a lot of time in China, and back in the early 2000s, and it was always weird. The police didn't carry a gun. Now the military would walk around with an AK or something, and I would ask, the locals, like, why is that? And they go, if we steal, we get our hand cut off. I'm like, hey, what
Right.
a concept. There's a reaction to doing something, and if you never get in trouble, or if it's sometimes, I've been around people, so I go to jail on purpose during the winter because I get free heat, 2 meals a day, and internet. I don't have that. And so, with a lot of that, I can understand. The last section I want to talk about, it's something that we talk about quite a bit here on Trucker Talk Radio, is the future AI, autonomous trucks. I'm okay with AI. I think AI is going to make things better. It's going to make people be more efficient. You can do more in your 8 hour, 10 hour day. I don't think it's per se going to take everybody's job, because I think you just need to learn how to use it, and you can make it do a lot for you to make your day a lot more efficient. Autonomous truck side, I like the idea. I don't know if they can keep up ever with the demand of making them, because technology changes so much. And I mean, it's great for what they're doing, out in the basin and different things like that, where it's private roads. I mean, it's perfect for that. The infrastructure on our end too, we're, as you just said, the government's very slow. Just even back to the electric car, we're so far from the electric car being normal, because we don't have anywhere to fill it up on the side of the road. But what are your thoughts about the future with all this new tech coming into it?
Yeah, yeah. So I know a fair amount about autonomous because I worked for an autonomous developer for a couple of years. But on the AI, I agree with you 100% that it's going to make people's jobs more efficient. And I think that companies that don't have, a lot of resources spent on IT or tech, I think they're the ones that are going to do real well because of AI, because they're not going to spend a lot of money on on AI or consultants that know AI or tech. So I think those that care to learn it and spend some time on how it can be leveraged for their organization, I think those people are going to do real well.
Mhm.
On the concern side, here's why I have a concern. And I talk to a lot of my friends that have, you know, teenagers, high school age, even some, college kids. I hate to see that entry level job go away because it can be done by AI. I mean, a lot of
That's true.
folks, that's how they became, the
Mhm.
director, then the VP, because they did that entry level job and did it really well, and they learned the other part, and so they grew into leadership. I would hate to see that somehow the AI supplants that, takes that over, and you don't have that normal course of promotion. But that's more personal than it is actual, hey, I know what I'm talking about.
But
So
I will say that's a good point that I've not heard, and I actually understand that like because I've kind of done all the grunt work kind of stuff
right.
and learn, and that's where you learn a lot of it, and that's where you can define by an executive, you see what you get when they're starting out to know, hey, that person's got it or that person
Yep.
understand. So yeah, I mean that's a good point.
Yeah. On the autonomous side, I've been on a lot of rides that were driven autonomously, although always had a safety driver, but no intervention. The driver never had to do anything. I think the technology is absolutely amazing. I think it has great potential to eliminate accidents. I think that it can also be used as a great tool for drivers. I
Yeah.
don't see it in my lifetime being, well, here, I know this to be true. I know that if you're a truck driver today, you're always be able to be a truck. AI or autonomous is not going to take your job. My personal opinion is if my one of my children had a grandkid in the near future, I think that grandkid would be a truck driver if he or she wanted to be. I don't think we're going to see autonomous eliminate truck drivers anywhere close to my lifetime. Are are you believe we're going to see it start to proliferate in some areas? I think predominantly in the Sun Belt. I think down south, I-10, that type of thing. Longer hauls to help with turnover in the longer haul space.
Yeah.
So I do think it has its place, but it's not gonna take over all truck driving jobs in our lifetime. In fact, I'll just throw out a number. If there's 10,000 trucks running with no human in the next decade, I'd be a little bit surprised. I think to your point, first off, making them is an issue, and keeping up with the advancements of technology. I think it's very promising, and but I don't see it as being a labor issue. I don't. I know some do, but I don't, because I just don't think it's gonna be prevalent enough to take away large quantities of truck driver jobs.
Yeah, to me, it's more of a niche, right? It's just
Yeah,
like if you're a heavy haul or you're a tanker driver, you're going to have a section where you have that. I mean, I tell drivers all the time, if you're worried about your job, just go be a flatbedder. AI is
yeah,
not going to do the flatbed because no one's
no,
going to take responsibility of who strapped that load down. I mean, they're not going to say that they're just not. I mean, you
yeah,
don't, that's just too much liability to be a flatbedder and you never have to worry about your job because
yeah,
they're not going to allow a robot to do it. They're not going to, the insurance is not going to think that the person at that warehouse did the job right. They're going to want the person that they're insuring to strap it down. So that's what I tell them for sure. One thing I've been a recruiter for a long time. I did that probably as much as I did anything in trucking. Is that something that y'all have a lot of conversations about? Because retention is 90 something percent. I mean, it's horrible. A lot of carriers just fill a seat. They don't do the due diligence to make sure that that driver is exactly who they need to hire. The process is lengthy. Drivers get impatient. But with all that being said, it is hard, in my opinion, right now, even though the market's up, they're making good money. How do we get to this next generation of truck driver? How do we explain to them? Like I was at the Texas Truck Show a week or so ago, and I had a young man come up with his father. I wished I'd remembered their names and wrote it down, but his dad didn't really know much about trucking, but that's what his son wanted to do. So we talked for a good 30 minutes. I gave him my personal information if he had questions. But and what I told him was, look, you're single, don't get married, don't rent an apartment, just stay in your truck for a couple years, go see the country, it's beautiful, make all the money you can, and then start your adult per se life with a family in your 30s, and then you come back to being a regional driver. Most of the drivers that
yep,
we get now have a family. They don't want them gone 2 or 3 weeks at a time. So it's hard if you can't get 18 to 25-year-olds to understand that process. It's what benefit is it for them because they're gone or they can't make it up. We need to do something to make the industry seem better. To me, the industry's fine when it comes to the, I wish the drivers got paid more, of course, because they really haven't had a raise ever per se. It's still in the 50-60 cent range for a company driver. But what can we do as an industry? Maybe that's something y'all talk about to bring in this next generation to be ready for it and want to be a truck driver.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a lot, and the answer is yeah. I mean, we TCA Truckload Carriers, we did a member survey about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago, and recruiting and retention was one of the main areas that they would like the TCA to spend more time on. Oh, we spend a lot of time on it now. So yeah, that absolutely is a critical component of what we do, and which critical to our industry. So what can you do? There's several things. One, yes, the image. The image needs to be better, right? And so if a 16-year-old, all he or she hears is, truck drivers, it's a tough
Negative, negative.
life and negative, negative, negative. Okay, maybe I don't want to do that. And by the way, the autonomy hype probably doesn't help that either.
Right.
So maybe be more realistic in the hype on what autonomy is going to do. Speaking of the government, so couple things on the good side, they now allow Pell Grants to be obtained by folks that go on to go through truck driving training. That's kind of a big deal because they didn't used to be able to allow that. I think ensuring the integrity of the schools, the programs, I think that's important. Obviously, the administration is working on that. But lastly, and I know this isn't the topic that everybody in the industry agrees upon, and I get it, but an interstate truck driver, you can't do that till you're 21. Now, most states, if not all states, allow an 18 to 20-year-old to do intrastate,
Right.
which makes no sense. So you can go from LA to San Francisco, but you can't
Right.
cross the border in Arizona. So there are programs that the federal government has started to pilot 18 to 20-year-olds. And unfortunately, they haven't had as many participants as I would like. To your earlier point about veterans and insurance, a lot of
Same thing.
carriers that aren't self-insured have trouble getting those people insured. But think about that, right? If you're an 18-year-old, and by the way, I do think there's the trend, not the trend, but you see more 18-year-olds who decide, I'm not going to go to college and pay $40,000 a year and graduate with $250,000 of debt. I'm going to go find a trade, and I'm going to be making money at age 18, and I'm not going to be in debt to my eyeballs till I'm 50 years old.
Absolutely.
But if you're 18, you don't have the opportunity in interstate trucking, right?
Yeah.
And so, unfortunately, what we see for some folks is trucking is their second or third choice because they didn't have that choice when they needed that paycheck at age 18 and leaving the house, right? So I think the government's working on it, and we do have to find a way to make that a quicker path for folks that want to be a truck driver at an earlier age. There's a mentoring program that the agency, that the FMCSA now has, if you want to do interstate 18 to 20-year-old, which, by the way, I think is a good program. And there's a item or two in there that was controversial. Like they had to have interfaced cameras. Well, that was a mistake because now some folks don't want intercab cameras.
Yeah.
But they fixed that. So I think if we can find, to your point, Justin, some way to have a quicker, now not shortcutting safety, but a path for 18 to 20-year-olds to become involved in the industry. I think that's a good thing for the industry. I think it's a good thing for 18 for 20-year-olds. And candidly, if it's done right, I think it's a good thing for safety. You can't convince me that having a 19-year-old drive with a trainer next to him is any more dangerous than a 21-year-old. I just don't see it, right?
I don't know.
And by the way, 18-year-olds can go serve in the military for our country and take on a lot of hazardous duty doing that.
Exactly.
But
A lot of quick thinking and decisions they have to make really fast, which is what you do in trucking, right? I mean, it's to it. So now I like your point there because I agree. I've worked with mainly owner operator companies, and you got to be 22, 23.
yeah,
And I've had a thousands of 18, 19-year-olds call that drove farm stuff and know
yep,
how to drive, right? They grew up, most of those have grown up on the farm. So,
yep,
just like the military, they've got the experience and know how to shift gears and know how to back up. And like to your point, like I had a trainer driver from Prime on a couple months ago, and he really talked up Prime's program where that's all he does is train. And I'm thinking, I thought the same thing, like, well, why couldn't you have an 18 or a 19-year-old in there learning from a veteran? Okay, the
yep,
veteran's got to be paid a little bit more per se, or you don't pay
yep, yep,
there's ways to work that out. But that's because I didn't go to college. I went to work. And for the same point, I wasn't going to be in debt just to be a business owner. I knew what I wanted to be, but my hand-on experience was so valuable, more than, I could ever have gotten out of college. And for the same thing with the driver, if a driver can sit there and it's good drivers teaching them,
Yep.
that's more than you're going to get as a 22-year-old that they just say, here you go, you're out there by yourself right out of college. I mean, out of school. So
I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree with you more.
yeah, I like that perspective all. So my last question.
Yes,
So
sir.
since you work in DC, you've worked with administration stuff. If Congress asked you for one recommendation that would greatly positive impact on trucking, what would you come up with for them?
Well,
Or the long list. I know there's probably
no,
more than
no,
one,
no.
but
At the risk of being self-serving, it's this modernization effort that we're working on. Properly fund the agency so it can properly do its job. And here's the thing. And yes, it's safety. Yes, it's safety. Yes, it's safety. But I think we all know now that the folks that are cutting corners, whether it's cheating on their ELDs, whether it's cheating on the ELDT, whether it's running hot and illegal, whatever it is, that making sure that those folks are not in the system, because those folks, what do? They undercut everybody on rates. So that's part of the reason why you saw a 3-4 year rate recession. And now you're starting to see some correction on the rates because the regulatory environment has changed. They're enforcing the rules on the books. They're not allowing folks that shouldn't be out there operating commercial motor vehicles be in the business, and you're starting to see some normalization of rates. And so what our reform ask, what our reform proposal is, right size the resources for the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration so it can do not only a safety mission, but make sure we don't get back in this mess again where you have people that aren't even lawfully here in the country driving trucks, and not just a couple, dozens of thousands, right?
right.
This isn't, by the way, this isn't an immigration thing. It's not an immigration thing.
Nope.
It's a safety thing, right? And so that's my biggest, and we have our TCA, we have our call in Washington where we'll have about 150 of our members come in. We'll go visit with their delegation and leadership in Congress, and that's going to be our top talking point, focal point, is this modernization of the agency that regulates the truck and bus industry. Because honestly, you can like Administrator Barge, you think he's a godsend, but he can't do it. They can't do it with the resources they have. They need more resources because I mean he'd be the first to tell you, they've shut down, what is it, thousands of truck driving schools that aren't doing it right. They've taken certifications away from ELDs that aren't doing it right. But that has been at the expense of enforcing out of service enforcement and other types of enforcement because they don't have the resources, right? So he's had to shift from this bucket to that bucket to deal with that. It's like whack-a-mole, right? It's like whack-a-mole.
Yeah,
But
right.
you give them enough resources, or any administrator enough resources, where it's not whack-a-mole, it's you can keep everything under control. That's step one. And until we do that right, I think it's going to be a whack-a-mole process. And it ought not be, because when you have over 5,000 people killed every year in accidents with trucks, it shouldn't receive 1 billion, and FAA get the 35 billion. It just doesn't make any sense. And
No.
so it's Republicans are in the business of liking to spend more. I get that, but
Mm.
we're asking a lot of the agency. We all
Yeah.
want safer roads, so let's give them the resources and tools to do it properly.
Absolutely. And the problem for trucking's not going away, because
Hmm.
the one thing about trucking is all these accidents we've had over the last couple of years. And I say this all the time, my listeners probably get tired of me saying it, but the accident in Florida where we had the guy make a U-turn, carried less, that the minivan went under his truck. You got Gen Logs that's got cameras out everywhere. You got the ELD companies that's got cameras. You got people with cell phones. That's why we having these talks now, is because the images are getting out, and that puts pressure on the government. So none of that's going away. And I always tell my daughter, I'm glad I didn't grow up in this era. I don't want that many. I grew up right when cell phones first started, but no one had them. I did, but most people didn't. They were still stuck in the car. You couldn't walk around with it, and there's no such thing as privacy per se anymore. And so anytime there's a major crash, social media blows it up, so it just puts pressure on
Yep.
everything. And I agree. I even will go to even back to 9/11. When 9/11 happened, trucking should have been mixed right in with that. I don't know why it was, and I'm just a simple country person that non-educated, but the trucks are more dangerous than an airplane will ever be.
Right.
It's a 80,000 pound bomb. No matter who's driving, a foreigner or an American, it don't matter. It's still a
Yep.
bomb, and
Yep.
I wished we would have put more rules into that because the airlines is important to us as everyday travel and some freight, but
Hmm.
trucking is our infrastructure.
Hmm.
And if it wouldn't be hard to put a plan together to use trucks against us for sure.
I know, and thank God it hasn't happened yet. But
Amen.
yeah, yeah.
But it is. It's just it's a scary situation. I appreciate people like you that are heavily involved fighting to try to get us back in the right track, trying to help the trucking industry level out some. One thing too that I don't think listeners understand, and like I said, this is not an immigration thing. I've been blessed. I've been all over the world. Everywhere you go, there's English, right? English is on every sign. America is, a land of immigrants per se, but we can't have 900 different wording on a sign. That's why we just have English. And if you're going to come here and work, no matter if you live here full time or you come over here or you were born here, you need to learn English. I mean, that's just if you want to be part of America, you got to learn English. I mean, English is the world language per se, and God bless people that can speak 4 or 5 languages. I can barely speak English, but I can read it, and I'm able to travel where I need to. But it's just so dangerous if you don't know what the road signs are and stuff. I mean, you're putting everybody at harm. Your family, my family, everybody's family, and it's just something. I'm glad the administration is trying. I know they're understaffed, under budget. They are trying. That's what I always try to tell people all the time through my platform. They are doing the best they can. They want to do more, but as you say, government runs at a different speed than most of us that's got business side or just normal. And there's, like you said, there's reasons why they do that, and I understand that, but we always want it faster. But I do appreciate everything that they are doing, and again, I appreciate everything you're doing. But Jim, I do thank you so much for coming and being my first guest on this episode of Trucking Conversations. I couldn't think of a better guest either for this launch of this series with your unique experience from transportation law all the way through the federal leadership. That's just amazing background that I appreciate you would give your time to me and my show and my audience. But before I let you go, let everybody know how they can find y'all, website, social media, any of that. So in case there's somebody out there that's got more questions for you.
Truckload.com. That's how we can be found. Truckload.com, or just Google, Truckload Carriers Association. You can find us. And yeah, please reach out. And hey, it's been a pleasure chatting. I really enjoyed our discussion.
Yeah.
And, I'd love to come back, hopefully give you some updates on where we are on this modernization as we get through the process.
Awesome. That would be great. I look forward to that as it's ever changing, and it's always a good thing when we have things in the pipeline. So I'd look forward to that. I want to thank everybody for joining us today on Trucking Conversations with Justin Holden, presented to you by Trucker Talk Radio. If you enjoyed today's conversation, I invite you to subscribe, share this episode with someone in the industry, and then join me for future conversations with leaders that's shaping the trucking future. Check us out on all our socials: YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, TikTok. We're all on there, so I appreciate any views and shares. And until next time, stay safe, keep learning, and keep the conversation moving. Today's episode is sponsored by Gray Cross. Every day, professional drivers make sacrifices that most people never see. Long hours, missed holidays, time away from family, and the responsibility of keeping America's supply chain moving. Gray Cross was created to support those drivers and their families when life takes an unexpected turn. By providing assistance, resources, and support during the difficult times, Gray Cross helps strengthen the trucking community one family at a time. Because behind every truck is a driver. Behind every driver is a family counting on them. If you'd like to support the mission, visit graycross.org to learn more. Donations are always appreciated, but simply sharing their message with others in the industry can make a tremendous difference. Gray Cross, supporting the people who keep America moving. Today's episode is brought to you by Ready App. Trust is the one most valuable asset in transportation. That's why Ready App created Driver Verify. Driver Verify helps carriers, brokers, and transportation companies gain greater confidence through verified driver identities, professional credentials, work history, and onboarding visibility. Drivers can securely maintain CDL information, endorsements, certifications, and employment records all in one professional profile. As fraud continues to impact the transportation industry, verification has never been more important. Ready App, verified drivers, trusted freight. Go check them out at ready-app.com.